Presumed Guilty Under Scrutiny, the G-Rap Files, Episode 7, The Final Blow. My retirement date was imminent, and despite the crushing administrative flag, a strange sense of peace settled over me. After years of fighting the CID's absurd case, a case where they never found a single witness, a single piece of evidence, and refused to even interview me, I was feeling happy. I was retiring from the military. I felt the sense of victory. The CID never did anything after so many years of painful work and tensions. You could not know what I went through unless you had been falsely accused and attempted to be crucified. Part of me still wonders if the CID people coming after me were doing so because of something I did to them while I was stationed in Panama or something I knew about their people. They were probably afraid of the names that might have come up because of the CID world. Every name that surfaces has to be thoroughly investigated, and if they don't, someone else will. But that's getting too deep into their own dark world. Anyway, while preparing to exit the Army, I transitioned carefully, ensuring no administrative problems. Everything went right. Even the day I was getting out, they gave me a DD 214, the official discharge paper, without any issues. My final day was a blast, and I got everyone to sign me out. I was finally officially out of the military. I felt free. That freedom lasted less than 24 hours. The very next day, the AG, the Adjutant General, called me. Their message was stunning and instantly shattered my relief. You need to come back because that retirement you did not count. They were telling me after I had officially signed out, received my discharge papers, and started my file as a civilian, that my retirement was invalid. This was the opening salvo of the illegal final blow. I want you to understand this. The moment the military realized I was retiring, the AG knew they had to act fast to bring me in back under their control. They stopped everything the Pennsylvania Army National Guard was doing that day because sabotaging my exit became their primary mission. It is clear that they prioritized my condemnation over every other duty on their plate. They intentionally broke laws and suspended normal operations just to ensure they could target me before I successfully left the military. That night, processing the whiplash of being free one moment and being dragged back into the fight the next, I had a dream that made me understand everything I was living through. In this dream, I was at my house and a large white guy with a white beard was knocking and opened the door. At the same time, he showed me outside of the house, and it was a bunch of wolves who had destroyed all my enemies. All he said was not to worry, as if he had my back. I understood that that day I needed to go back there and walk with my head up and let things be handled by God or by the Wolf Master. This persecution was not the end of my story. It was a test of endurance, and I was being told to trust that my enemies were being dealt with by a higher power. I went back in, head held high, knowing that they were about to attempt their biggest, most illegal hit yet. This segment is the $70,000 bullet. The phone call from the Adjutant General telling me my retirement didn't count was the sound of a closing trap. I went back to the base, head held high, trusting the spiritual sign of the Wolf Master, but fully aware that I was walking back into the hands of my executioners. I was immediately escorted by my sergeant major and two team leaders. First of all, let me tell you about my sergeant major. I love that dude, man. He's great. He was able to, put a little punch here and there, but not really do anything. The other two guys that were there, they weren't even part of my team. They were part of the whole entire company. I don't think they'd really care whatever was going to happen to me. They walked me to the AG's office as if I were a criminal going to the gallows. They certainly knew what was happening to me, but of course, no one said anything. While we were waiting, one of them asked me what I plan to do with my life. I told him, I'm not going to work for anyone ever again, especially not the government. I'm going to start a business solutions company to help struggling companies or a detective agency. I had already started the paperwork for the detective agency, a company that will later be officially accepted for my credentials. I think they were probably laughing on the inside, thinking how stupid I was to be dreaming of something impossible when my life was about to be ruined. I was worried not by the accusations, but by the indifference. The people who should have fought for me did nothing. They were there only to watch me fall. Once I got to the AG's office, the personnel handed me a discovery packet. And I didn't know what the hell a discovery packet was. I asked what it was for. They said it was just for me to read. It was useless. Nothing but hearsay, no evidence, no witness. It was a final mockery of a failed investigation. They presented me with a counseling form confirming the CID investigation. And to avoid trouble, I initialed the box that said, I understand. Then came the illegal demand. The AG brought out a new flag. I questioned it immediately. This flag was already given to me in 2014. Now you want to forget that flag and backdate it all the way to 2005. I asked why. They told me it was because the investigation technically started out in 2005. I told them this was illegal, that the investigation was already closed out, and what you're proposing is illegal and not the conduct of a high ranking officer. His response sealed the malice. Regardless of your signature, this was going to take place. The $70,000 bullet and the edge. Let me give you guys an idea of what this meant. They decided to take my flag that they gave me in 2014 and illegally backdated all the way to 2005. This action would retroactively strip me of my rank of sergeant first class and legally demand back all the pay I received under the rank since 2005. Let me put it to you this way. The total amount they demanded was more than $70,000. But you know what? One thing they forgot, they took my rank because that was money. But they didn't take all my awards. I had tons of awards because I was the best at everything I did. How come they didn't take that? Because there was no money into that. That's why they didn't take it back. This was a clear indication of foul play by the Department of Criminal Investigations of the United States Army and the Pennsylvania Army National Guard working together to make sure they were taking enough money to protect the generals from the money that Congress was claiming they lost. I'm sure these guys knew I was already broke. My heart fell to the bottom. And in that moment, I felt as if God was making me pay for something I had done despite the spiritual message of comfort. I signed all the paperwork. I just wanted to run. I think I spent so much time attempting to end my life during this period, but it wasn't for my daughter, Amelia. I would have been gone. She was my anchor. If you are those agents, those generals, and the people involved in the destruction of my life, my integrity, and everything else that you destroyed, just know that I forgive you and I let you go. I leave it all in the hands of God and the wolf master that he brought down. This illegal backdating of the flag, this sudden devastating $70,000 debt imposed after my official retirement is the definitive evidence of Army National Guard's malicious intent. It was not a mistake. It was an illegal execution intended to destroy me financially for life. This segment is the complete collapse. I walked out of that office carrying an illegal $70,000 debt and the shame of a demoted rank. But the military was not done with me. I didn't immediately realize the intense financial hit the military was going to deliver all at once. It was clear they made sure they were going to hit me hard, ensuring I suffer so much I will be tempted to kill myself. When you retire from the military, there's no immediate lump sum of money. There's no just the retirement check. You cannot collect unemployment or get welfare. When I got out, my very first check was literally $5 because the Army took all my money for the first 6 months to begin offsetting that illegal backdated debt. They left me with absolutely nothing. I was already deep in crisis, not paying my mortgage and struggling with my bills, though I tried to shield my immediate family from the full extent of the collapse. They knew I was in a bad situation, but they didn't know the depth of the betrayal. And then disaster struck at home, just as if the devil was coming after me with one more final strike. My wife started cheating on me and then kicked me out of my own house. I was destroyed. At the moment when I needed someone, at the moment when I was in desperate need of help, I had no one, not even God. The loss of my family, the loss of my home, and the loss of my finances all hit with a terrifyingly short period. This was the ultimate cost of the Army's malicious prosecution. I had another dream, one final vision that pulled me back from the brink. In that dream, it was me and a few of my soldiers who had captured a big snake. And when I say a big snake, it's big enough that was able to fit in the back of a truck. We were taking it somewhere, and then the truck that held that snake flipped and instantly killed the snake, while all the soldiers watched as the source of the trouble was finally gone. That dream kept me up again and kept me from killing myself. It was the confirmation I needed. Life cannot be over because in this world, you are either good or bad. The bad was not going to win this battle. That dream gave me the resolve that I had to live, that the snake, the enemy, the malicious prosecution was ultimately defeated. The Army had taken my money, my rank, and my marriage, but they did not take my life, and they did not take my integrity. They left me with nothing but the truth and the will to fight. This segment, I call it Starting at Zero. The Army was done with me, and they had taken everything but my life and my resolve. I was officially retired, officially demoted, illegally indebted, and personally destroyed. I began my life in the civilian world as if I had started out at zero, with nothing to my name and nowhere to go. The financial execution of the military immediately followed me. I was hit with almost $1,800 a month in child support, and I was not making anything. I had a $5 check. I was homeless, broke, and suddenly tasked with rebuilding an entire life from dust. The pain inflicted by outside scrutiny was profound. People looked at me and made me feel worse than whatever the Army had already made me feel. Even while I was hustling, putting on a brave face, and starting my detective agency, the psychological wound festered. It took me a long time to forget about the military sometimes. I would go to a corner of the house and just lay there in a fetal position and cried out in silence and blamed God for everything. This actually happened quite a few times. This is not something I wanted to reveal to the world because it makes me feel like I'm weak, but I'm not. That is the fight I have often with myself. The shame of the demotion, the debt, and the loss of my family was crushing weight that continued to try and pull me under. But I had the dream of the wolf master and the survival instinct for my daughter, Amelia. My back was against the wall, and I had no choice but to push as if I had no tomorrow. I launched my detective agency on April 1st of 2016. I began knocking on doors of every lawyer in Philadelphia. I spoke to so many, and luckily one of them gave me a hand. He lifted up my spirit, telling me he had never met anyone with such a charisma and attitude to work so hard. A couple of years later, after surviving the initial onslaught and establishing my footing in the civilian world, I made a decision. I knew the only way to heal and to truly defeat the snake was to fight back. I decided to fight the Army by conducting congressional inquiries, actions that will allow me to push for another legitimate investigation into the GRAP scandal and my own case. This was the beginning. My fight was no longer about surviving an investigation. It was about exposing the corruption that had tried to kill me, destroy my family, and steal my future. My work as a detective was about to turn into the biggest case of my life, investigating the U.S. Army. The segment is the closing. I walked out of the door with an illegal $70,000 debt, the clothes on my back, and an inner battle against despair. The institutional betrayal was complete. They took my rank, my pay, and my home. The Army didn't just fire me, they executed a financial and emotional sabotage campaign. They hit me with a $5 retirement check, the crushing 6-month pay hold, and the impossible burden of child support, all while I was simultaneously reeling from the collapse of my marriage. Even in the depths of the pain, laying in a fetal position, crying out in silence and questioning God, I knew this could not be the end. The dream of the wolf master, the image of the crushed snake, it told me that the bad was not going to win. I was ground zero. I was a man who had lost everything, and that absolute freedom gave me immense, unstoppable power. I had nothing left to fear. I channeled the despair, that silent rage, and that certainty of my innocence into a singular purpose: investigation. I began to use my new detective agency not for clients, but for myself. I would not let the military bureaucracy hide behind its closed doors and paper trails. My fight was no longer about surviving an investigation, it was about exposing the conspiracy that had tried to kill me, destroy my family, and steal my future. A couple of years later, after surviving the initial financial and personal onslaught, I made a decision to take a fight directly to the highest level of government. I was ready to force the Army's hand. In episode 8, The Counterstrike, we transitioned from survivor to investigator, from the victim of the CID to the hunter of the truth. Subscribe to Presume Guilty Under Scrutiny to hear how I transformed the pain of the $5 check and the loss of my family into the energy needed to fight the system. Thank you for listening to another episode here of Presume Guilty. This is now an ad about my detective agency, Warstone Detective Agency. When you need answers, you need the absolute best. For years, the residents and business of Philadelphia and the entire state of Pennsylvania have voted Warstone Detective Agency as the premier name in discretion and results. Our reputation is built on our foundation of professional law enforcement experience and unwavering commitment to our clients. From the most sensitive domestic matters to complex corporate fraud and security needs, we deliver the definitive information you need to move forward. Our core investigative secret services include discrete surveillance, criminal and fraud investigations, missing persons and locates, domestic affairs like infidelity, matrimonial and divorce, employee interviews, international investigations. We are the gold standard for private investigation and security in Pennsylvania. Don't settle for less than the best. Call Warstone today for a confidential consultation. 215 326 9199. Till next episode.